Well, good morning. This is Barry Odell with the Church of Christ at Mammoth Spring Facebook page. It's Thursday morning, November 17th, 2022, and we are ready for 1 Peter chapter 3. Good to see everybody joining on. Let's see here. Lyle, good morning. Gail, Janie, Diana, Barry, and Glenda, good to see everybody joining on. Cross-posted, of course, onto the Near Churches page. And as always, if you have any questions or comments while we're going through our study today, feel free to use the comment section on either of those pages, and I will acknowledge them when I see them. Like I said, 1 Peter chapter 3, we're going to try to cover the first 7 verses this morning. And we are in the section of 1 Peter, started in chapter 2, verses 11 and 12, talking about a Christian will conduct himself honorably in life. And so he covers a variety of areas where that will take place. As soon as I get to 1 Peter here, I can help you out. 1 Peter chapter 2, beginning in verse 13, we submit ourselves to every ordinance of man, so we're good citizens. Good morning, Connie. Good to see you. 1 Peter 2:18, beginning, if we are servants, Peter's addressing servants in that particular text. You be submissive. You work hard to the gentle and to the good and gentle, or the straight. You know, that word gentle means equitable or fair. You know, straight shooter, you might say. But also to the harsh, or remember that word harsh in 1 Peter 2:18 means, well, the Greek word is skolios. Okay, scoliosis, the crooked. Christian conducts himself like a Christian under any circumstance. There is no allotment for the Christian to misbehave, to revolt, to be overcome by evil. You know, I think of Romans 12:17-21. Do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. And so in all aspects of your life, and that's what he lays out here in 1 Peter 2, beginning really in verse 21, Jesus left that example for us that we should follow in his steps. Now, we get to 1 Peter chapter 3, and he gets very specific. He gets very domestic, let's say, dealing with the husband and wife. And a lot of interesting things in these verses. And it's interesting. So let's think about this for just a minute. 6 verses are devoted to women. 1 verse is devoted to a husband. Why is there such a textual discrepancy in the sense of volume? Why 6 verses for women? Why only 1 verse for men? Well, if you got something to say about that, let's hear it. Let's see it. I don't know that I have a good explanation other than first century context. It's interesting when you look at both the Old Testament and the New Testament. In many societies in those ancient days, first century and prior to that, Old Testament, as we would call it, Old Testament times, it was often the case that in, how would you say it, heathenistic, ungodly societies, women were often looked at as personal property. And then when you get to the scriptures, there is protection after protection in the Old Testament for women, but also in the New. And you might say an elevated status is given to women in both covenants, and particularly in this passage. And so perhaps that's a reason why there are 6 verses for women, 1 verse for men. But I think it all kind of plays together. I don't think it's at odds with each other in any way. So let's just see what it has to say here. The 3rd word or 4th word in the text is submissive in 1 Peter 3 and verse 1. Now, we've already seen that word twice, okay? 1 Peter 2:13, therefore submit yourselves to every ordinance of man. 1 Peter 2:18, servants be submissive to your masters with all fear. And wives, likewise, be submissive to, and notice this here. We'll talk about submissive in a minute, but notice this here, to your own husbands, okay? Gail only has 1 husband. She's not submissive. She's not to line up under the authority of some other man or all men in general. She's my wife. I'm her husband. And so this role is for an individual couple. All right. So Connie says the custom back then was more geared towards the man being the head or leader of the family. Wayne says because of the importance of the women's role, and I would say yes to both of those. That's right. But again, Christianity and its elevation of the woman and the importance of her role. Just for instance, when you read like Romans chapter 16, for instance, when Paul greets so many people by name, he starts off with a woman, with Phoebe. You see Priscilla working with her husband Aquila in the biblical text. And so many women are mentioned throughout the biblical text. The women that served with Jesus. What is that? It's in Luke's. Maybe some of you guys know. Somewhere in Luke, it talks about the women who attended or ministered unto Jesus. They were there at the cross with him. They were there throughout his life. He was very close to Mary and Martha, we learn in John chapter 11. So I would say certainly the role of women is elevated in Christianity, and in Judaism too, I would say. Anyway, likewise, be submissive, line yourselves up under. It's a military term. You get in rank, and it shows roles. It shows that the word shows that there are different roles, different responsibilities for the males and for the females. And if the husband is not doing what he's supposed to do, the woman is going to have a harder time doing what she's supposed to do, and vice versa. If the woman is not doing what she's supposed to do, the husband is going to have a harder time doing what he is supposed to do. And so the roles, as God has them laid out, the roles of men and women should really complement one another. This idea of submission is not dominance. And in fact, look down here at the end of this section, 1 Peter 3, verse 6, talking to the women. It says, if you do good, well, hold on just a second. If you do good and are not afraid with any terror. The husband should not be a domineering spirit towards his wife. He should not cause her to live in fear or terror, as it says there. And just, I have some notes here in the margin of my Bible. That word terror, the Greek word means a nervous excitement caused by fear. So a godly husband is not going to create that type of an environment for his wife. If he does do that, it might be hard for her to line herself up under him because he's not doing what he's supposed to do. Anyway, wives likewise be submissive to your own husbands. Well, why would they do that? Peter's writing to Christians here. Okay. Christian women who are married to non-Christian men, that even if some husbands do not obey the word, they, without a word, may be won by the conduct of their wives. If you're looking at a King James version, you'll notice that here in the King James it says without the word, and that's a mistranslation. The definite article is not there. It's called anarthrous. All right, there's no definite article. The husband, if he's not obeying the gospel, if he's not obeying the word, they can, without being preached to on a daily basis, be won by the conduct of their wives. That's something to think about. The importance of one's behavior in the home. Like Sunday gatherings, Wednesday night, everybody's, dressed fairly nicely. They're on their best behavior. But what are we like when we get home? Are we the same in all places? That's something really to think about. Well, a godly woman, can win her husband without a word, in the sense of he can observe her behavior, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Every person, in order to be saved, you have to hear the gospel. So that's not what this is saying. You can't be won without the word. But you can be won, a person can be won, when they observe your chaste conduct accompanied by fear. Chaste conduct, your pure manner of life. You live a clean life, and you're a person who reverences God. A woman can win her husband, to the Lord by that. Diana says those women with him were always serving and listening to him. We as women are to look to our husbands for, and Diane says something here. Diana, safety and stability, those are the first two words. I think that's primary roles of a husband. Safety, protection, and we'll talk about that here in 1 Peter 3:7 in just a minute, but stability. So many homes are anything but stable for the spouses, the husband and wife, they're always at each other. Anything but stable for the children, because maybe the husband and wife are at each other and the children are just, hey, I'm going outside, forget this. Safety, stability, and love unwavering, just as Christ had for us and did for us. There's a lot said there, Diana. Thank you for that comment. Okay, so our spouses, specifically here, a Christian woman needs to consider her behavior in front of her non-Christian husband. Now, that doesn't mean, obviously, that every time a non-Christian husband will be won over to Christ. And also, this is something to think about here. It's not a sin for a Christian to marry a non-Christian. I know a lot of people who believe that, and they always go to 2 Corinthians 6. Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. That's not talking about marriage, because the solution there in 2 Corinthians 6 is come out from among them and be separate. Paul's not discussing at all marriage in 2 Corinthians chapter 6. So 1 Peter 3 helps me understand that. If you're married to a non-Christian, okay, here's what you do. Do not let your adornment be merely outward, the New King James says. Arranging the hair, and this idea here, arranging the hair. I forget how the King James reads. If somebody's looking at a King James, why don't you type it in the comment section what it says about the hair? But the word here in verse 3 means elaborate knots, braiding. Maybe the King James uses the word braiding of hair. And there was a custom of weaving gold and silver threads in the hair, and it was all for show. It was to show one's status and wealth. You need to have chaste conduct accompanied by fear. It's not just about the outward appearance, the wearing of gold and putting on a fine apparel. Now, at the same time, Peter's not condemning here jewelry. He's not condemning earrings or makeup or anything like that. He's condemning this outward emphasis that one's physical appearance is all that matters, because that's not all that matters. And if a person is so shallow as to think that that is what matters most, then, well, they're pretty shallow. And our society places a premium on looking good and looking good all the time and standing out from the crowd. Well, maybe that's the wrong emphasis. Maybe we have a lot of shallow people in society who care only what they look like and how, what brand name stuff they have. And again, there's not anything wrong with having nice things and looking nice. But that's not the emphasis that the Christian is concerned about. And so the emphasis here is on the spirituality of the person. Let it be the hidden person of the heart with the incorruptible beauty. Okay, look at that right here. Verse 4, the incorruptible beauty. All right? Our physical beauty is corruptible. All right? It fades away. We get older. We get wrinkly. Things happen, don't they? Okay, yeah, verse 3 talks about the plaiting of hair. Plait, I think it is, plaiting. It's the idea of braiding. So what we need to be most concerned about is the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. To the world, one's physical appearance is very precious. But I don't care what the world thinks. That's not the Christian's concern, just of how we look. For in this manner, and then he talks about examples, for in this manner, in former times, the holy women who trusted in God also adorned themselves, and here's our word again, being submissive to their husbands, all right, lining themselves up under. God has an order in the home, and when that order is disrupted, the home cannot be what God intended it to be. And again, you just look at our society, and single-parent homes, broken homes, abusive homes. You destroy the home, and you destroy the foundation for your local communities, for society at large, and in fact, you destroy the foundation for the church, for local congregations. Most local congregations are made up of family units. I guess you'd say all of them. Husbands, wives, children, and perhaps even, extended family members. Anyway, This is how holy women behave themselves. And an example, Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, it says here. And that's an interesting word. I went to the Hebrew and looked that up, and it's the Hebrew term Adonai, or rather Adon. And it is a word that means Lord and Master. And it's not that a Christian wife has to call her husband Master. That's not the idea. The thought here behind this word in 1 Peter 3:6 is a recognition of one's authority. Again, God has a certain rank, if you will, a certain order for the home to follow. And Sarah and Abraham are used as such. She recognized his authority in the home. And by the way, that's a quote of Genesis chapter 18 and verse 12, if you care to write those references down. Whose daughters you are if you do good and are not afraid in any terror or with any terror. So you do what's right. Your husband's not mistreating you so as to cause you nervous excitement out of fear. He's not abusive. He's not domineering. You guys work together. The husband and wife work together to make the home what God designed it to be. The foundation of all society. And when we mess with the home, and we see it in our culture, you mess with the home and all of society suffers. There is no question about that. Lack of discipline, lack of parenting in general. I see this on Facebook sometimes. I follow this individual who is a Christian, and they are against all forms of physical punishment. No spanking. All you do is when you spank your children, when you discipline like that physically, you're teaching them violence. Well, they've bought into the worldly concept of let's just talk them down. Let's just talk to them. Now, we need to talk to our children. There's no that's not the issue. Yeah, we all agree with that. But to deny the necessity of chastisement, Hebrews chapter 12, and the book of Proverbs is littered with this concept of how would you say it? Forms of physical punishment, and not abuse or anything like that, not out of anger to cause terror. But there has to be some physical punishment. But there are even Christians who have bought, my point is, there are even some so-called Christians who have bought into this. Every form of physical punishment is violence, and that's just foolish. It's a completely misguided concept. Billy says, doesn't that mean we are to dress appropriately as a Christian should? That's exactly what it means. In fact, Billy, good thought there. Let me turn over here and I'll put it up on the screen for you. 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 9. Listen to this. In like manner also that the women adorn themselves in modest apparel with propriety and moderation. I think the King James says shamefacedness instead of propriety. That's an interesting word when you look it up. And it has the idea of being able, the technical definition is moral repugnance toward indecency. And, that's the idea of propriety and moderation. And again here, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothing. Again, the emphasis is not on the external for the Christian. The emphasis is on the internal, the gentle and quiet spirit. Connie says, you can plainly see that the lack of discipline in the home has raised very unruly children. Yeah. That the evidence is indisputable. You just open your eyes and you'll see it. All right, back to 1 Peter chapter 3. So here's something I want to consider real quickly. So the role of women and the woman being submissive to her husband. I want to show you something, and I'm going to turn in my Bible first. It's over in, 1 Timothy chapter 5. So let me pull it up here on the screen for you. This, in context, is Paul is talking about widows, certain age groups, and he gets to talking about younger widows and the proclivity they might have to become busybodies and just running around from house to house talking and running their mouth. And so he has some instruction for them. Here's 1 Timothy 5:13. They learn to be idle, wandering about from house to house, not only idle, but gossips and busybodies, saying things which they ought not. Okay? That can happen. So what's his instruction to them? Therefore I desire that the younger widows marry, bear children, manage the house. I want to look at that for just a minute. Okay, so 1 Timothy 5:14, for the woman to get married and manage the house. Now this is a combination in the Greek language of two words. An English word that we would be familiar with is despot, D-E-S-P-O-T. The Greek word here is oikodespoteo, house manager. A despot is one who possesses supreme authority. Think about that, because I think to an extent there are those who have mistaken the idea of the husband being the head of the wife and the wife being submissive as the man makes all the decisions, he's in control of everything, and he does what she says. Scripture says that the woman is to manage the house. She is the despot of the house. That is her realm. That doesn't mean she's not submissive to her husband. Again, the husband and wife have their own roles to fulfill. But she is the despot of the house. That is her realm, and the husband should not try to take that away from her because, number one, it's not his job, scripturally. Number two, it is her job. And so he needs to work with her. And that's what we're saying. These roles, the roles of the male and the female, the husband and the wife, are not, they don't fight against each other. They're not contradictory. They complement one another. The husband is the head of the wife, just as Christ is the head of the church. The wife is to submit herself to her own husband, and the wife is the despot of the house. That's just what Scripture teaches. And maybe this little section right here has been overlooked a bit. Here's another text. Let me turn over here since I'm thinking about it. Titus chapter 2 and verse 5. The older women are to admonish the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, homemakers. Okay? Again, the idea here is, and this is a different word, this is not the despot of the house, but this is their realm of work. And the husband is not to try to domineer and to take that away from her because, well, I'm the head of the house. We better be careful with the things that we say that are not scriptural like that. Connie says, we aren't teaching modesty to our young people. Just go to the lake or swimming pool. Or, hey, how about this one? Social media and the immodesty that's on there and how much, a young person will post this or that immodest behavior, immodest dress, and the parents and grandparents just like it and love it and share it, and they don't even take a second thought about it. So yeah, we're teaching them the wrong things. That does not mean that wives don't have an opinion on what should be done when it comes to the family either or the house. Well, again, the woman, biblically speaking, the wife is the house despot. And again, look up that term in the English language and you'll see precisely what it means. All right, let's get back to 1 Peter chapter 3 here. So we've talked about the women and her role and her conduct in the house if she's married, specifically here in 1 Peter 3 to a non-believer. She can win him by her chaste conduct. Husbands, likewise, dwell with them. That word dwell in 1 Peter chapter 3:7 means you have to live with them. You live in the same house. And think about what Jesus said in Matthew 19. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. The marriage relationship creates, there's a new home created. You don't need to live with your parents throughout your marriage. Now there may come, and I'm sure some people have experienced this over time, that something comes up, or maybe you're in the process of a move and you have to live with someone for a while, maybe live with your parents. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is a husband and wife create their own home and they dwell together. They have to live in the same place. And, not only do you have to live together physically, you have to do so with understanding. And the Greek word here is gnosis. You have to come to know your wife, know everything about her, if you will. And so when you do that, you'll give honor to the wife, value, esteem, respect. Okay, respect goes both ways. It's not that the husband reigns over the house as master and he demands all the respect and the wife and kids are my servants, and I'm the overlord of all of this. Well, no, that's not how it works. There is a value, an esteem, a respect that flows in both directions. The husband for the wife, and the wife for the husband. And in fact, I think, Ephesians chapter 5, see that the wife reverence her husband. What verse is that? Ephesians 5:33. Well, the wife is to reverence her husband, and the husband is to honor the wife. Okay. It goes both ways. This is not one-sided. Again, the husband-wife relationship is complementary. And there are roles. There's a role for the husband, there's a role for the wife, but they complement one another. And you think back to the Garden of Eden, I will make a helper, the New King James says, suitable or compatible to the man. That's what the wife is. All right? So husbands, likewise, dwell with your wives according to knowledge, the King James says, or I prefer the New King James reading here, with understanding. All right? Giving honor to the wife, notice this, as to the weaker vessel. There's always discussion that comes up. Well, how is the wife the weaker vessel? I think it's the way that God made us physically. It has nothing to do with mental capacity or lack thereof. This has to do, in my view, to the role of the man as the protector of the home. The woman is the despot of the house. The husband is the protector of it. And so, again, this has nothing to do with, and it's been expressed, I would say rather ignorantly, that the male, is smarter than the female. Well, I'll just say it this way, that's just dumb. That is not true at all. The husband is to be a protector of his family, and specifically here of the wife. And then notice this, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. Life can be enjoyed. And I think, and in fact, we're not going to get into it today, as you keep reading here, notice 1 Peter 3 and verse 10, he who would love life and see good days. Okay? Heirs together of the grace of life. Verse 7. I truly believe that God wants his people, he wants people in general to enjoy life. That doesn't mean that life is always going to be enjoyable, and we get that. But he didn't put us here to be miserable and to just barely make it through. Sometimes it may feel like that. The grace of life and loving life and seeing good days. Well, in the home, the ability to be an heir together of the grace of life and to love life and see good days, the husband has to do his job and the woman has to do her job. And again, if one is trying to do both, then they're going to fail at that, but the other person, the other spouse, has set them up for failure. If the husband's not doing what he's supposed to do, he's setting his wife up for failure. And if the wife's not doing what she's supposed to do, she's setting her husband up for failure. There's so much that goes into this. And notice what it's all connected to, that your prayers may not be hindered. And I love that word hindered here because it's so easy for us to understand. You've had your cell phone service drop. That's exactly what this word means here. Hindered. It's cut off. Your prayers, the way a husband dwells with and treats his wife can end his prayer life. God will not hear it. That's something to think about. And if we misconstrue the role of the husband, if I as the husband think that I'm in charge of everything, I make all the decisions, and you're just here to do my bidding, your prayers aren't going to go any higher than the ceiling, as we say. That's not your role. So the relationship that the husband and wife have together can either, as it says here, help us to enjoy life, or, as it's been said, it can make life hell on earth. And there are situations like that. There's no doubt about that. But again, if we're not doing our role in marriage, then we're really hurting the other person and ultimately ourselves too. Gene says he created everything for us to enjoy, the beauty of the trees, mountains, skies, etc. Yeah, and marriage too, and family and children. God is a good God. And I can't help but see it here. And by the way, this is a quote from the Psalms. Love life and see good days. What does that mean? That's what God wants for us. All right, guys, let's stop there. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. So we're done. We're done until Monday. Hope y'all have a good weekend. Of course, we'll be live here Sunday at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. for our services. If you're under the weather, not able to get out or something like that, you can access this online and worship in your house if that need arises. All right, guys. Well, I hope you have a good day. Hope you have a good weekend, and hope to see you back here Monday. And we'll start in 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 8.